Hey everyone, I'm about to get on a live with Marnie Pearlstein, so let's see if I can bring her in. Here we go. Um, hey Marnie, let's see if you're there. There you are.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you, my friend?
Uh, I'm okay. It is 10:30 in Israel. It's been a day, as you know.
It is 7:30 in the morning in Sydney. It's been a bit of a night.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can just set this up for people following. Marnie and I are friends. We actually are not just advocates in the fight. We're actually friends and we've become quite close and we speak regularly. And yesterday we were talking and I'm just watching all the news in Australia and I don't really know what's going on. And I wanted to know what was going on. And then we thought it would be a good idea to do this live and people could just listen in on the conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack about what's going on. And I just want to thank you, Aitan, because not because your interest is above and beyond regular interest. I think it's not just that ATAN is interested in what's going on in Australia, but really concerned and really wants to be productive in doing something that can help. So I think this chat is really helpful, just in terms of making people who are maybe not in Australia understand just the level of how bad things have got here in the last few months.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, it's kind of odd as an Israeli living in Israel to be saying I feel helpless that I can't help because I know what it feels for people around the world, the Jewish community especially, who are looking at Israel and saying, how can we help? But there are a lot of people who, we're with you, Marnie, and we're with the entire Jewish Australian community in what you're going through. And it is not a little bit of anti-Semitism. It is not a little bit of Jew hatred. It is scary and it is worrying, and I'm worried. And I want the Australian Jewish community to feel that they are loved and that we're thinking of you. You guys are all the way on the other end of the planet, but we're with you. But we need to know. And so, look, I
Thank
mean,
you.
didn't have anything set up. I just thought, just have it like I'm going to try and pretend that it's just you and me. What is going on? What is happening?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we would need to take it right back to October 7, maybe even before, to understand what's going on here. Firstly, when October 7 happened, October 7, 2023 happened in Israel, obviously the government that we had here in Australia is a Labor government. Our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is maybe one of the original pro-Pali University protesters. There is footage that has come out about our Prime Minister where there are videos of him at pro-Palestinian support groups. There is video footage of him talking about not exactly understanding Israel and the place of Israel. I mean, this situation was set up in Australia before October 7. Then October 7 happened, and the initial response from our government was not, we're so sorry this happened to Israel, not, we are so upset about the hostages and we are concerned about their safety. The initial statement really from our Foreign Minister Penny Wong was to issue a warning to Israel, telling them to show restraint in how they handled things with the Palestinians. So that was already the construct in this country. You know, we have always had an incredible relationship in Australia with Israel. We're strategic allies, military allies, business allies. We've got a very, very long-standing relationship. We have had in Australia the second largest post-Holocaust community in the world, second only to Israel. And this current government, rather than having Israel's back on October 7, basically started to trash Israel already. So that was the setup. And then 2 days later, we had the iconic images of what happened on the steps of the Opera House. So in New South Wales, Sydney, our state government wanted to light up the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House in solidarity with Israel. And that was going to be a very, very special night for the Jewish community of Sydney and Australia. But our community was told during that day to stay home and not to leave our houses because it wouldn't be safe for us. And then you had those iconic images of pro-Palestinian protesters burning Israeli flags and saying, F the Jews, gas the Jews, and not one arrest was made. Worse than that, sorry, go on, Eitan.
No, it's
Worse,
it just hearing that is so difficult because you know that there are going to be idiots. You know that there are going to be haters. It's it's par for the course. We're used to that, but to be met with no consequences is the worrying thing.
and
And
that's how it
it's
started.
yeah, and it's getting worse. But keep going. Sorry.
No, I think if you have a situation where out of nowhere, when your government is actively trying to support one country and you have these protesters who come in against that country, and there are no consequences to the hate speech. In fact, not only were there no consequences, but when our government and police force investigated this story and this situation, they basically gaslit the whole country. Instead of saying that what was said on that night was gas the Jews, there was a big investigation about the semantics. And the police said, no one said gas the Jews. What we heard was, where's the Jews? So if you're only saying where's the Jews, not kill the Jews, not gas the Jews, we can't arrest you. That's not hate speech. There was no threat against your lives. So that was the starting point, that we were told that what we heard was not even what was said. So everything started from there. And, you know, when you have poor leadership right from the outset and you don't have a community where there are consequences for negative actions, then stuff escalates, and that's exactly what has happened.
So keep going. What
So
kept happening?
what kept happening, there's been a fast escalation. Firstly, can I just set the scene, Eitan, and say that in Australia we are literally the arse end of the world. We're as far as you can get from everywhere else. You know, for us to get anywhere takes days. And our grandparents and ancestors came to this country post World War II or pre World War II, if they were lucky enough, to get as far away from Jewish hatred as they could. So I want to set the scene by saying that, because we are a very, very proud community of Jewish people, mainly because we descend directly from Holocaust survivors. I mean, my grandparents were Polish and left just before the war. My grandfather lost many siblings who weren't quick enough to get out of there. And there are so many stories here of people whose parents and grandparents are survivors and have hideous stories. So we're a really invested, proud community. We're very Zionistic. We've contributed so much to this country and we love Australia. And Australia's always been really, really good to us. So what's going on here now
It's
is
heartbreaking.
quite foreign and really scary, because it's not what we're used to and it's not what our grandparents and parents signed up for. But sorry, I've got a cold. So to continue, after that, what happened was our community was shocked. Basically, there was an escalation. The next thing really that happened was the doxing. I don't know if you remember the doxing of
Sure.
600 Jews in
Yep.
Australia.
hmm
So there were 600 creatives and lawyers who were doxed. All their details, their personal details were leaked. And there were businesses that were boycotted. There were individuals who were harassed. People lost work. They lost clients. They lost their privacy. People's children were threatened. So that was really the next step. From there, we had an escalation in terms of Jewish businesses being targeted, Israeli products being boycotted in stores. We had a situation in our major supermarket where in heavily populated Jewish areas, people that worked in the supermarket had gone around and identified all the products that came from Israel so that people would not buy those products. So that the next step was the doxing. And after the doxing, where, by the way, again, no consequences for the doxing. I don't even recall the government speaking out strongly against that situation. I mean, I just remember feeling that these 600 people were left to deal with that on their own pretty much. And it destroyed people.
What happens when something like that happens and the Jewish community in Australia and with some of your allies over there, the people that are with the Jewish people and they can see what's going on, they get what's going on. Has there been any reaction? I mean, I know that you guys are fighting, but what are you guys actually doing? Like, is there a Jewish leadership? And I'm asking because people don't know that is actively since the doxing, for example, or since the few days after October 7th, or is there a push?
Yeah, there's a strong push. We have incredible Jewish leadership in this country. We have very strong umbrella organisations that look after the well-being, the rights, the safety of the Jewish community. And those leaders are all working overtime to lobby the government, to work with media, to work with the community, to do interfaith work, to try and get other groups of people to understand what we're living through. And they are working really, really hard. But with the very strong push that has been made since October the 9th in this country, there has been such a weak response by the government that there have been no major policy changes or law reforms. Until a couple of weeks ago, there was zero arrests. It took 14 months for our government to implement a national program, which is called, I think it's called Everlight. It's called Operation Everlight, which was only launched in mid-December. And since then, it's now the end of January, there are 166 incidents being investigated by Operation Everlight. That's just in the last month and a half. So imagine what went on for the 14 months before. In Sydney, we have something now called Strike Force Pearl, because Sydney has been very, very bad at, and I'll get into that in a minute. Strike Force Pearl has made 10 arrests, but all of these arrests have only been made in the last week or 10 days. So for months and months and months, nothing happened. And, there's greater factors at play here. Like if you listen to the opposition, the Australian federal opposition, the party that is not governing right now, they would say that the lack of action has been a political ploy, because the Albanese-Wong government is trying to maintain votes in key seats that have very, very high Muslim populations.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, I think that's really important, because my next question before you started talking about it was like, there's always a reason for a lack of consequence when it comes to politics. So let's talk about the numbers of, and it's not a pleasant thing to say, to bring up the fact that there are Muslims who are supporting this government because they are anti-Israel. But I think we just need to talk about it openly. What are the numbers?
Let's talk about numbers. That's a great question. In Australia, there are about 117,000 Jewish people, and we make up 0.5% of the Australian population. There are 815,000 Muslims in Australia, who make up 3.2% of the Australian population. But between 2006 and 2021, the Muslim population in Australia has doubled.
Well,
And there has been, apart from lots of babies being born, there's been lots of immigration. Australia's a melting pot. There were a lot of people brought into this country after the Lebanon
yeah.
War, and I think that that's coming
So you're
back
talking about
to
like
bite.
around 7% now, because it was 3.5 and then it doubled.
No, no, no. It's 3.5 now. It was
Now,
one. It was
got
1.7.
it. Okay.
But yeah. But in the same way that we are, the Jewish community only makes up half of 1%. But we have a really strong
Yeah.
influence in this
Yeah.
country. Like, you know, we do great things and we contribute in a big way. And in the same way, a population that has 3.5% can make a big impact,
Sure.
negatively or positively.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of issues going on under the surface in this country. A lot of issues with funding, people getting crazy, government funds. Anyway, we'll get into that. But to set the scene with the numbers, yeah, there are some very important, the way that our politics works, there are very important seats, key seats that are essential for the government to win if they are able to win a full federal election. And we're on the cusp of a federal election. So any minute now, any day now, they're going to call an election in this country. And it's predicted that the election will happen sometime between February or maybe March and May, but probably sooner than later. So at the moment, everybody is on high alert in terms of wanting to do the right thing in the lead up to this election. Every vote's important and the key seats are really, really important. And some of those key seats are heavily populated by Muslim communities in this country. So the theory in the beginning was that there was a lot of police inaction because maybe the police were told not to make any arrests and the police were told to back off. And that is really what I believe. And that is what we've heard in a few interviews, even with former police staff and commissioners, that there was a strong directive from the government not to make arrests and to let people get away with this kind of stuff.
Is that something that, I mean, is there proof of that? Is there a movement to try, is there an investigation?
Um, there is not proof of that, but when you have the federal opposition leader, so the potential next prime minister, coming out publicly day after day, saying in front of the media and in front of the whole country that he believes that this situation has been handled badly for that reason alone, that's enough proof, because no man who's about to run for the top job in this country would say something like that if he didn't fully believe it and have proof to back it up. He just wouldn't say it.
Um, I don't want to skip over a lot of things, but as it's really hard to read the comments because I'm really trying to listen to you. But a comment came up that there's even a van was driving around with an October 7th license plate. There was an attempted bombing just the other day. Things are getting very, very bad.
Yeah,
How is
let me
Yeah,
let me go through the timeline of the escalation,
sure.
because it's been an escalation, and I think in the last few days we've got to a level of escalation that's incredibly concerning. But if I can take you through, we went from the steps of the Opera House to the
Hmm.
doxing to the boycotting of Israeli products and the vandalism of Jewish businesses locally. And just in the last few months, what we've seen, I'm just going to go through some things that have happened in Sydney alone where I live.
Sure.
So on October the 20th of last year, we had a kosher cafe burnt down, completely burnt down.
Yeah.
A month later, in Woollahra, which is around the corner from me, there was a situation where 10 cars were firebombed and there was anti-Israel graffiti all over them. And then less than a month later, maybe 3 weeks later, there were two houses and cars sprayed with anti-Semitic graffiti and a car torch. That was December. And then since January, since the beginning of the year, it has just gone crazy. We had a car sprayed with another incident of a car vandalised. Then we've had 2 synagogues vandalised. That's apart from the synagogue in Melbourne that was firebombed. There was a synagogue in Melbourne that was firebombed. We've had a house of a leading Jewish communal leader. The house that he used to live in was vandalised with red paint to look like blood, and 4 cars outside that house were torched.
Oh.
Then 4 days after that, there was a childcare centre, not even a Jewish childcare centre, but a childcare centre that was in the same street as a synagogue was firebombed. And the final thing that happened 2 days ago was that there was a caravan of explosives found in Sydney that had a 40-metre blast capacity, and there was a note inside that caravan with a list of Jewish targets. And it's just been released last night, actually, that the 2 main targets on that list were the Holocaust Museum in Sydney and the Great Synagogue, which is the oldest synagogue in New South Wales. They were the main targets, but there was a list of Jewish targets on that note. And so we can see that we've gone from weekly protests. Sorry, I did leave out. There were weekly protests in the same way that you saw all around the world. That's how things started. Weekly protests, university encampments, and university protests, all of that stuff has led now to a situation where there could have been a mass casualty incident. And this has been allowed to happen because of inaction from our government and because they were just trying to win votes.
So now that, well, first of all, it's just horrifying to hear these things. These are, you're my mate, this is personal.
It's personal. And Eitan, I just want to make the point that a lot of the Jewish people in Sydney, I'm just speaking as a Sydney resident, we live in quite a close area, quite close proximity. And for the last 2 nights, none of us have slept because we have helicopters surveilling our houses all night and looking over our homes to make sure that nothing's going on. And it's become pretty full on, I have to say.
It's totally full on. When I'm hearing this list, I mean, it's horrifying. It's really scary. It's really scary. This is very close to. I mean, I'm all the way in Israel, and I'm getting goosebumps from what you're saying because this is not a joke. This is not some random acts of kids, doing silly things. This is way bigger than that. What's being done at this stage? What's being done, especially in the last 48, 72 hours with these?
Well, firstly, if I can set the scene for the caravan of explosives, that story was leaked 2 days ago by a journalist at the Sydney Morning Herald in Sydney. And none of us would have known about this if not for that leaked story. And the government and the police are rightly sort of defending their position. They knew about the caravan for 10 days before the story was leaked. No one in the community knew about it. And I understand that they were trying to investigate and needed to do that without everybody knowing, but they didn't even inform the communal organisations in Sydney. I mean, most of our umbrella bodies read about it in the press like everybody else.
Why?
And well, they defended their position by saying that they needed no one to know about it in order for them to conduct their investigation without it being compromised. But Peter Dutton, who's the guy who's running for Prime Minister, has said it's completely unacceptable that the Jewish community did not know about this for 10 days. And I mean, on one level, I really would want to know about this, and I do want to know about this. I'm about to send my child back to school on Monday, and our schools are already armed with armed guards. And I'm pretty sure that when I send him back on Monday, we will not just have armed guards outside all of the Jewish schools, but we will also have state and even maybe federal police, which is what happened after October 7. You know, I sent my oldest son for his final year 12 exams, and there were, you know, Australian Australian police at the gate, welcoming him to his final exams with guns. And this is what's going on in Australia. It's no joke.
Someone just wrote, what's to investigate a van of explosives is pretty straightforward. No, it isn't. I mean, is there an
I'll tell you why
investigation?
it's not.
Yeah,
I'll tell you why it's not.
it's not straightforward at all.
It's not straightforward. I mean, the fact is that the van was dumped in an area, in a very quiet outer suburban area called Dural, and it was found by a curious resident. Now, to me, if the police were doing a really thorough and professional investigation, they should have, obviously they had to wait and see who stumbles across that caravan. Maybe there are clues in that, but the things shouldn't have been leaked. But there have been 2 arrests made, and I had a lot of really crappy comments online yesterday, and a lot of people were saying, oh, but 2 white Australians were arrested yesterday. And that's true. 2 white Australians were arrested in conjunction with this yesterday, but they're not the main players. It's come out that they are drug addicts who had drug debts, who were forced into doing a lot of bad things because it was a way to pay off their drug debts. So there are layers of criminal activity here, and we're not getting to the bottom of who is really perpetrating these crimes. There is some talk that there are international players and that there are local people here being paid to do a lot of these horrible things, but until we have real answers, we don't know what's going on.
And is there an entity right now? I mean, I know we're talking about the government and the police, but is there a special entity that is tasked with following the clues, kind of like getting to the bottom of this? I mean, are you guys aware of how seriously they're taking this, even if, of course, the results are not, you don't have the results yet, but
they are taking it very seriously. I mean, there's now this federal Operation Everlight with millions of dollars invested. There are 100 policemen in New South Wales, in Sydney alone, dealing with domestic issues in Sydney. 100 police on these issues. There's increased surveillance, there's increased funding. I mean, in New South Wales, you've got Operation Pearl, and all of that is great, Aitan, and it's fantastic, but it's too little too late, because it's all come 14 months after the incident on the steps of the Opera House. So for 14 months, this hatred and this hate speech and these rallies and these protests and these encampments were allowed to happen. And all of this sentiment was allowed to fester with nothing being done. And the result of that is this.
Yeah, and not only not being done, when you don't apply consequences quickly and don't send that message, then you embolden, and you are basically encouraging people and saying, hey, it's okay to do that.
100%. And, I think we're missing a really key element to this whole conversation. And one of the things I've always said is, if you have a government that does not support Israel, you'll have a population that does not support Jews. And I want to talk a bit about what our government has done.
Sure.
In the last, and I've got notes here, I've written it down.
Oh, you really did your research today. Well done.
No, Satan. No, I think it's a really key. Sure. It's a key element to this discussion, that for 20 plus years, the Australian government at the United Nations has always voted by abstaining with all of the UN motions. And all of a sudden, Penny Wong, our foreign minister, in the last few months and this year, has voted for immediate withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza. So all of a sudden, you've got an Australian government who has never directly voted against Israel at the United Nations, who all of a sudden is. Okay. And that sends a very, very clear message to the Australian population, And you've also got you've also got a woman who recently conflated Israel with Russia and China by saying that Australia expects Israel to comply with international law like authoritarian regimes such as Russia or China. So basically what she did, in the minds of Australians who have no context, no history,
Yeah, they don't know.
they don't know. They don't know. They hear Russia, China, Israel, and that's what they think. Russia, China, Israel. And so when you're talking about domestic terrorism, it's happening as a result of Australia's very weak position on Israel and their inability to educate the Australian population about what Israel really is and what Israel really stands for, and about the long-term relationship that our country's always had with Israel. So it's a real failure on the part of this government.
You know, this is what I said to you yesterday. I'm sitting here and I'm in Tel Aviv, and God knows we have our own issues here in Israel, and you've got the campuses in the States and around the world, and you've got, you know, in a very similar situation to Canada, what I'm hearing about Australia. But I'm sitting here and I'll say the same thing, which I asked you yesterday, which is like, what can we do to help? And I think that's, and I don't know if there's an immediate answer, but I think we need to start saying that openly. Like, as a Jewish community, it's great that there are Jewish organizations, um, and it's great that there's the Israeli government, and but there are also the people who are watching right now are just regular Jewish people, and also a lot of people who are not Jewish but who stand with the Jewish people, and I want to acknowledge them and thank them. What can we do? What do you think we can do to help individuals, even if it's not to maybe help the bigger picture, but just as individuals, what can we do to help, Marnie?
Thanks for asking that. I think for the Australians who are watching, the single most important thing you can do to help when the next election is called is to vote out the Albanese-Wong government. That's the single most important thing. It means even if you're not someone who would have traditionally voted Liberal, and I don't want to get into a political conversation, but it needs to be said, even if you're not someone who would have ever voted for Peter Dutton, you have to vote for Peter Dutton if you want this to change, because I was at a roundtable conversation with him and some communal leaders last week, actually, and he released his plan for dealing with this, and it's decisive and it's strong, and he will be implementing 6-year minimum prison sentences, lots of money thrown at the problem, but real consequences, really fast consequences for this kind
Similar
of
to what
action. So
Similar to what Trump is doing right now,
similar
and
to
I
what
think that that's
Trump's doing
yeah,
now.
and I think that that's something that we should talk about. Like, I'm not, if you ask me, I'm not a Trump fan in the sense that he's not my cup of tea.
Same.
But it's not even a question when lives are at stake, and if you keep going down this slippery slope of no consequences against a community of people who are educated to hate you, then you need to vote for the person that will provide the consequences that will protect you, even if that candidate is not perfect. Right now, that's what's needed in Australia. Um, so,
It is
you know,
what's needed, because we also have clerics in some of these suburbs who are teaching Australian children some of the same stuff that Hamas is teaching Palestinian children. And we've seen evidence of that. We've seen, there was a video released a little while ago with a guy with kids lined up in Western Sydney, and they were practicing lying in a green coffin to see what it would feel like to be martyrs and be closer to Allah. So there's all kinds of weird shit going on in this country, and we need decisive leadership to put a stop to that. We either need to send these people out of the country, which Peter Dutton is willing to do. We need some serious consequences for spreading hate, teaching hate, and perpetrating hate in this country. But if you are from overseas, if you're not Australian, obviously you can't vote in our election, but there's still a lot you can do. You can be speaking out to the media in your cities and countries, to be writing stories about what's happening in Australia, and encouraging those stories, whether it's on social media or in legacy media, to make the point that the current government in this country is just simply not doing the job of looking after not just the Jewish community, but the whole of Australia. There's a complete breakdown in social cohesion across the whole of Australia. And it needs to be talked about globally, because there needs to be international pressure put on our government and our population. I mean, I get messages every single day telling me that people had trips planned to come to this country and they've cancelled their trips. So there's an impact on our tourist industry. There's an impact on our reputation internationally.
When
And
you
it really
say
needs to be
when you
about.
say an impact on the tour, I mean, I can imagine that a lot of Jewish people are scared of going. Although, as you know, if you can get me to Australia, I'm there in a heartbeat, and I'm saying that publicly because you know that that's what I'm trying to do to try and just strengthen. But are you saying that people who are not Jewish are, or is it mainly
Yeah.
Jewish?
Look, it's a lot of Jewish people because
Sure,
they
of
are
course.
scared, and I get a lot of questions about whether they can wear their Jewish jewelry or their I'm that Jew t-shirt publicly, and I'm like, yes, you can. But there are also non-Jewish people who just don't agree that with the policies and the actions of the current government, or the actions of the small percentage of Australians who are causing this trouble, and they don't want to give their tourist dollars to this country. And I
And I'm
get
sure that,
that.
yeah, and I get that too. And I'm sure that if this is being allowed to slide, and look, all that I'm interested in, as right now is the Jewish voice and what's happening to the Jewish people. But I imagine that if they're letting this slide, then what else are they letting slide? For your average Australian, besides security and protection, just the
Well, I'll tell you
values.
what they are letting slide, and it is an issue of security and protection. But if you look around the world at all the countries that have allowed Gazan refugees to come post October 7 into their countries, well, look at all of the Arab countries, the Middle Eastern countries, zero. I think America at one point let in 4. Canada, I think, let in, and I don't have the numbers right in my head, but Australia let in over 3,000. We let in more people from Gaza, 72% of whom, when polled, explained that they had an affiliation and a support for Hamas, a recognised terrorist organisation in
God, your
Australia. We
government is
let
so
in
dumb. Your
thousands,
government is just so
thousands,
stupid.
right?
The
And they
government is
were let
just
in
stupid.
stupid, right? And they were
Stupid.
let in on this. It gets worse because they were let in on tourist visas. And at some point, the government created a law or a situation where they could fast track those tourist visas into permanent visas. So we now have, just as we did after the Lebanon war, we have thousands of Hamas loving new Australians in this country who are going to be spreading that kind of hatred throughout this country. So I don't want to know what this place is going to look like in 25 years. I actually don't want to know. It's really scary. I don't even worry about myself. I'm fine. My generation is fine. But what is this country going to look like in 25 or 50 years? You know what it's going to look like? It's going to look like France and England.
Do you think that there's a chance to reverse it, or do you think that ship has sailed?
I don't want to say it, but I think the ship has sailed. I think the ship has sailed. And I'll tell you a story.
Sure.
You know my husband, Gary.
Love your husband. He's a great guy.
Thank you. So the day we got engaged, which was 26 years ago, he said to me, our grandkids won't live in Australia. I hope you realise that. And I looked at him and I said, you have some kind of serious persecution complex, Gary, because my grandparents just got to Australia, and we're not going anywhere. And he said, no, I'm telling you. He said, there is going to be a problem in this country. He said, you wait and see. It won't happen straight away. He said, but he had a business where he was constantly in the western suburbs and he saw what was going on there. And he looked at what was happening in the streets and in those communities. And he said, it's going to grow and it's going to be a really strong force that it's going to be very, very hard for us to push back against, because by the time we realize what the problem is, it's going to be too late. And I hate to say it, but I look at him now and I say to him, I didn't get it back then, but I get it now.
It's hard to hear that.
Yeah, and it's hard to live with it because you do wonder what you can do to reverse it and can it be reversed? And of course, there are things that can really help with reversing it, like a change in government, like the so-called silent majority that we keep hearing about need to stop being silent. Like if you are Australian or if you're not Australian, if you are anywhere in the world, and this is the other thing you can do, if you are not Jewish, but you are anywhere in the world living in a place where you can feel that there is some disharmony happening because of racial hatred against Jews, you need to speak up against it and you need to support your Jewish brothers and sisters who are living in your backyard.
So I'm going to tell you a little story which has got nothing to do with Australia, but it has a lot to do with Australia. And by the way, I don't want it to be taken for granted when I say just thank you, Marnie, for first of all for strengthening your community and working so hard all the time, night and day. I know that people see you as they come on, they come onto their Instagram or whatever, and they see you speaking. But you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot by informing people. You're strengthening people. You're bringing people hope and fight. And I also happen to know how much more you're doing behind the scenes, which has nothing to do with social media. So it doesn't go without saying thank you, because you're a real example, I think, for a strong force, and you inspire a lot of people, and you inspire me. And there's a few people that I met from Australia who have come here, and of course you and your husband, and you're remarkable, and just thank you for doing what you're doing for yourselves and standing up for yourselves and fighting the fight, because you do bring hope. And even though things are bleak, that's what we have. We have hope, and you give a lot of it. So I just wanted to say that, and kind of,
Thank
you
you.
know, it's not easy. It's not easy.
I just think the day on October 7, I mean, you and I have discussed this before. I never planned to be, I was working in advocacy actually before October 7. I was seeing an increase in anti-Jewish sentiment in Australia, and I was really worried, and I was really, really worried about my aged kids who are university age. So I was trying for a few years actually to bring different programs to Australia and work with schools. At one point I wanted to go into corporate Australia and talk to people through a diversity lens, because I'm like, do you realize that we're actually a really, really small minority in this country, but we are targeted with most of the racial hatred. So when October 7 happened, you know, I was in a position just to jump on it, but I never could have imagined 15 months ago that there would still be so much to talk about in Israel or everywhere, here, everywhere.
And there will be. And something that I keep saying, and I know that you feel the same way, is this is a long fight. This is a long fight. I actually think we are in the Third World War.
Yeah.
I think it's a different type of war.
I agree.
And I think it's a war of narratives and ideology. And it's something that I spoke about 20 years ago when I was in America and 9/11 happened, and a buddy of mine was on one of the planes, all the attacks since. But you're a role model, Marnie, and you are informing the rest of the diaspora about what is going on. And it's so important that we know what's going on. It's so important that people get to know you guys, not as social media activist Marnie, but like as a human being with children who is literally fighting. And I do believe that the people watching can make a difference. First of all, follow Marnie. There are a couple of other people that maybe at the end of this, in another around 15 minutes, Marnie, you can tell people who to follow, Australian people who are not just, like Erin Molan, she's not Jewish, but she's an ally, who are speaking with moral clarity. I want to just tell you something that happened to me today, that I have my public accounts on social media, but I also have my private accounts for, my family and my friends. And there are Jewish people who have never spoken up, who are speaking up online with their friends. And we are all doing that. But today I came across a post from a buddy of mine who lives on the West Coast in the States. And he's, you know, if we talk about left and right, he's on the left. But he's kind of like, he sees the world for what it is at this stage. And he started speaking up. And now his friends are engaging with him. And as they engage with him, because he's been on the left, he's Jewish, he sees what's going on. And so I wouldn't say that he's moving right. I just think that the line has moved. But his friends are still in the same place. But he's taking them on politely, respectfully. And I honestly think that 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 is something that people can do one person at a time to engage. Yes, absolutely what you said, to reach out to media to get more informed. I think to follow Australian advocates and anything more that you want to recommend. But even in your world, if it's not Australia, it's so important for the average person to speak up against what is morally wrong and to not be afraid, because that's what our enemies, and when I say our enemies, I mean the jihadists who are educating the masses, their masses, to hate. They're instilling fear, and they're taking advantage of the Western values that we have in this work world that we live in. It's so imperative that the ordinary person speaks up, because everything is at stake. Everything is at stake. And I'm so proud. I was so proud to see my friend speaking up. We can all make a difference. And I really believe there's more that we can do for Australia by just speaking.
100%. I think it's all about grassroots education and just having one conversation with one individual at a time. I think, and I've always described it, is that for any of us who are not in Israel and not fighting physically in the IDF, we are all Israel's foot soldiers, and we are all the Jewish people's foot soldiers, and we all have a responsibility wherever we are to fight in the same way that the IDF is fighting. People say to me, when are you going to stop this? And I'm like, no, I'm not stopping. I will not stop talking ever, but I won't stop talking at this level until I'm sort of discharged from service, until there's a war that's finished and I'm discharged from service. We all have a role to play. And I've said to people, you don't have to be on social media. You don't have to be putting yourself at risk or talking to large groups of people. You just need to have a conversation with your next door neighbor or the person who cuts your hair. And
Can I just
I
say, I
agree
want
with
to
you
try,
$100%.
I want to actually say, to push it a little bit, it's not you can even or you can just have a
That's right.
conversation. You should, you
Yeah.
have to. It's imperative that you say that you are Jewish. Why? Because when you say that you're Jewish, and it invites a conversation for people to get to know us against the lies. And I think that, by the way, and I do think that this is related to Australia. Of course, it's related everywhere. But one of the biggest failures that we've had as a Jewish community around the world is that we have not spoken up openly about who we are. And that is going to need to be a forever war, meaning that is the thing that all of the Jewish organizations and the Israeli government and the legacy foundations, everyone needs to push Jewish narrative. But the person that is listening right now, who is not got 10,000 followers on social media or whatever it is, you can make a difference by speaking up and by getting informed and by taking it upon yourself to be the foot soldier that Marnie is. Speaking is huge, because speaking can change, changing the narrative can bring you allies. It can put public pressure on the people that need to be pressurized. You need to speak, and that people can do. So tell me, in the few minutes that are remaining, Marnie, I want to know, maybe there are some people, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but people that we can follow and support, people who are fighting the good fight, voices that we can amplify. I mean, we know you, but everyone should be following. If you're my followers, please follow Marnie right now and just pay attention to what she's saying, because it's really bad over there. Is there anyone else? Erin Milan, of course, who's not Jewish, who's a mate, and she's doing incredible work. But are there any other Jewish voices that we can follow?
I think everyone should be following Shari Markson, who is a Sky News Australia journalist, who is a Jewish woman fighting
Yep.
so hard and breaking amazing stories 4 nights a week on national Australian television. I think everyone should be following her. She's a powerhouse. I think everyone should be following Gemma Tognini, who is a journalist. She's not Jewish. She writes for The Australian. She also appears on Sky News as a contributor, and she is an amazing friend of the Jewish people. She's just recently been to Israel on an AJAC mission. She really, really gets it, and she puts herself out there. I think everyone should follow Michaela Ezra, because she is a very special soul and brings a very a very deep spiritual Jewish perspective to our problems, and I think it's really, really comforting.
She put up an amazing post yesterday, by the way, and everyone should go. Michaela Ezra, of my followers, go and follow her. She put up an amazing post yesterday where she was talking about her anger and her frustration, and she's raw, you know, she's real. And I
Yeah,
think that it's great to follow the people who are making a difference in the news, but to follow actual people, just regular people. I'm not saying she's regular, but you know what I mean. Just like, but yeah, sorry, keep
yeah.
going.
Yeah, no, I think everyone should be following Nova Perez, who is, I can see some people putting her name on the screen. Nova Perez is an Indigenous Australian woman who was a champion Olympian. She's also worked in politics, and she has really, really put herself on the line to advocate for Israel. And she understands the Indigenous connection of Jewish people to the land of Israel, because she has the Australian Indigenous connection to the land here, and she's really incredible. There's Nate Buzz, who's an
Nate Buzz.
Australian actor. A lot of people follow him, and he's amazing. Freya Leach is a Christian young woman who is also amazing and has been an incredible advocate. She works in politics. She's really, really worth following and watching. Let me think who else. Lisa Goldberg and Monday Morning Cooking Club, because she brings this Jewish warmth, and there's a food element, because before she was a Jewish advocate, she had released a series of amazing Jewish food books, and that connection is a really great thing.
Just so that, because people are saying, can you please post a list? I think what I'll do is I'll post this video for people who missed the live, and you can watch this. And then maybe Marnie, in the meantime, you can WhatsApp me the handles of a
Yeah,
few of the people that you mentioned, and I'll copy paste and I'll put it in there.
amazing.
But because I really do think that the people listening can just follow, just be aware and speak up and share. If you know people in journalism, contact them, tell them what's going on. So you and I spoke yesterday about like a company that I worked with, a technology company that has a weapons detection system for small arms that I'm going to still speak to you about, Marnie, to try and get it to some Jewish leadership in Australia, that maybe they can invest in this to help protect their communities. I mean, anything that people can do to help. I think it's so important also to just show that you're there for the Australian Jewish community. Just show that you're there. Just send everything that you can. I mean, we're all in this together.
It's
So
Israel. We're just all one people spread out, but all just trying to help each other. In the same, and Eitan, I just want to make the point, and I'm sure everyone from Australia who's watching will agree, that we, as bad as things are in Australia, our like our obsession is what's happening and what has happened in Israel. And we are so with you, and we are so connected, so invested. None of us sleep. We are on a 24-hour news cycle. Many of us have traveled to Israel on missions. We are at fundraising and communal events round the clock. So as much as I want to thank you for your support of Australia, I just want you to know how connected the Jewish community, not just the Jewish community, there's a lot of non-Jewish people who are very invested in Israel and very connected. We are an obsessive community, as I've explained to you. Many of our kids have gone to Jewish day schools, and most of our kids have been on programs to Israel, and we are super Zionistic. So I want you to know that the concern and the care and the love really goes both ways. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing there, because I'm Eitan and I, as we have said, are friends, and I want to tell you how much this man has put on the line and given up in terms of time and work to advocate. Like it's a passion, and he lives and breathes it actually more than anyone I've ever seen. So thank you. It goes both ways.
That's okay. No need to thank me, but we're with you, and maybe supporting Australian Jewish businesses, maybe.
Yeah, we can do it.
And you know what? As when people watch this, maybe write in the comments ideas of how to, I think one of the big silver lining in all of this is that the Jewish community around the world, there's a renaissance. And we know this, that the Jewish community is coming together. But the Jewish community shouldn't just come together in times of a crisis. When the crisis blows over, and it will, when it does blow over, we must not remain disjointed, we must not disconnect, and we must not become apathetic, because in terms of speaking up about who we are and getting to know each other and forging real relationships, like Marnie and I have a real relationship, we cannot squander that, because if we do that, everything that we have gone through will have been for nothing. So if there's any silver lining here, it's what you're seeing right now. Jewish people coming together, and non-Jewish people who align with our values of hard work, of morality, of family, of all sorts of things, of Torah, of learning, even if you're not religious. Shai Davidai is the most Jewish person that you'll ever meet, and he's a fucking atheist.
That's the point. I just want to make, sorry, I'm just interrupting you, because the point I want to make also, as you're saying this, and I'm so on your wavelength, like just in relation to I'm that Jew, there, which is obviously Eitan's brand, but there is no right or wrong way to be a Jew, and there is no right or wrong way to support Jews. We are just all here to be human, and however you identify, in whatever way, we have to stay connected, and we have to be open-minded, and we have to be accepting and not judgmental, and we have to be one person. And that's the message that you have consistently sent out online. Even I just read so much of what you say. There are times where there'll be internal conflicts, even between content creators or between different Jewish groups. And Eitan is always the one who pulls it back to say, no, we need to be one people, and we need to be one strong force. And I think that's really the most important message, that we just need to all support each other, regardless of what we believe, what we practice, what we do, who we are. We just all need to support each other.
We can disagree. We can agree to disagree. We still show up tomorrow morning. There's actually someone who's a friend of mine online. I pissed her off with something that I said, and I won't talk about it here. But the message that I got was, "Hey, Eitan, you do you, I'll do me." And my response was, "Nah, not right now. Every person, we are all in this together." So we can fight and we can disagree and we can wrestle with each other's opinions, but we have to be there for each other because it really is existential. I mean, you see what happens when we don't have an investment in a narrative, and a narrative means speaking. Narrative means communicating. When we're not communicating with each other, we kind of fall apart. And you saw that, by the way, with Israel and the diaspora over the last 15 years for a number of reasons, up until October 7th. And the diaspora is closer to Israel than it's ever been in decades, many, many decades. But there is, and this is the warning that I'm putting out there. You might not be able to imagine it falling apart, but it can easily fall apart. The people that hold us together are the people. It's not the organizations and it's not the Israeli government. It's the people. So the people can help people like Marnie, people like Michaela, people like Lisa, all of the people that she's mentioned. You can strengthen them, show up for them, help them, reach out to them, be a friend, you know? And you're my friend. So I love you, Marnie,
Love you.
and I really appreciate you taking the hour to just fill everyone in what's going on. I hope people share this. I hope people write comments in the. None of the comments that we have here will appear because when you post it, all the comments are lost. But when people watch this, please suggest, reach out, follow people, and just we have a long road. We have a long, long road, but we will be okay. We just have to keep fighting.
We're in it together. ביחד.
ביחד ננצח, ממש. All right, lovely.
Love you.
Love you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you to everyone who tuned in. Sorry that we weren't communicating, but we really just wanted to get Marnie's story out there. So thank you for all your comments and everything.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
lovely. Bye.